during the beginning of the mainstreaming of digital technology during a period called the late 1990s, an interdimensional evil digital force known as the Nejireja, led by Dr. Hinata, attempt to invade our dimension. However, aware of their existence, a defense contract organization known as INET, led by Dr. Kubota, designs an arcade fighting game called Megaranger to find their army. One of the gamers drafted into this fighting force is a high school slacker named Kenta, who becomes Mega Red. And along with Kenta are his classmates from his school. Koichiro becomes Mega Black, Shun becomes Mega Blue, Chisato becomes Mega Yellow, and Miku becomes Mega Pink. And eventually an engineer named Yusaku will join the team as Mega Silver. And with the support of INET, these high school kids will work together and fight the forces of evil. I don't remember the particular Super Sentai series from the 1980s that did, the high school theme, because of course I've never seen it yet. But if you know what it is, please tell me, and do you recommend it or not? But even though Power Rangers in its heyday relied heavily on using high school students as its main cast, this is the first Sentai series that I've personally seen in which the team mostly consisted of teenagers, of course with the exception of Yusaku. And I thought that using the high school kids in this series was used very realistically well, and I think when it gets to the climax, the whole consequences, especially in a Japanese cultural sense, is very well played out here. And what I also liked about this particular series is, like in Car Ranger, not only do the Mega Rangers have to keep a secret from their friends and their teachers and their families, but even the enemies don't know their secret identities, even though in some Sentai series the enemies always knew the identities. But I think in this context it all brings a different kind of tension and intensity to the rivalry. And it makes the cast less assuming of their superhero activities, which I thought was done effectively well in this series in my personal opinion. The characters each have their own personality that stands out, but I feel the individual development is focused more on the first third of the series, while the rest of the series is focused more on developing their relationships and their teamwork, and showing how far that development goes. Of course, Kenta comes across as a slacker and doesn't really take his work seriously, but the series does a great job of fleshing him out, and that he does show a very mature sense of responsibility of his mission, and he's willing to fight for what he believes in, no matter what the cause and no matter what the odds are. And then you have Koichiro. Even though the Red Ranger is always traditionally the leader, Koichiro is the Black Ranger. He's a very capable strategist. He's very disciplinary towards the team, he's very serious about his mission, and he expects everyone to take the mission seriously. And he does a good job of trying to keep everybody in line. And then you also have Shun. He's the most reluctant to join the team, but after being touched by Kenta's courage, he embraces his responsibility. And then you have Chisato and Miku, who can be clumsy, but they really know how to do their job, and at times their relationship will be rocky, but they will be there for each other when it counts most. And as for Yusaku, I never really felt like he was really part of the team, and felt more like a tuxedo mask, even though that comparison does come across as strange to some of you people, even to me. But that's the best way to describe him. Considering that he's older and has responsibilities to the team and to INET, I can understand why. But I felt when he had his time limit during his initial appearances, I felt his character was much cooler since it allowed his action sequences to be more higher paced. And on some side trivia, the guy who plays Shun, Matsukazu Masaya, would become much more famous as a seiyuu. He's actually very famous to many gamers as the voice of Hazuki Ryo in the cult game Shenmue, one of my personal favorite games of all time, and my gateway to this actor, was also the voice of Mikami from Death Note, and I thought he did a very good job in his role as Shun. And I think he has a lot of potential as a live-action actor, which I hope that he explores more with, but I'm unaware of other live-action roles he's done, except the Shenmue commercials, which I thought he did very well and looks convincingly like Ryo. But anyway, moving on. And then you also have the great famous Suzuoka Hirotaka, God rest his soul, who was also famous as the voice of Kuno from Ranma 1/2 and Bright from Gundam, voices Ugande, a villain in this series. And then you have the mentor, Dr. Kubota. I really liked his character a lot. I felt that he had this charisma and presence of, of not just being, the leader, but also being a good father figure. And he really shows that he cares for the Mega Rangers and would do anything for them. And he's always has their back. And this is the kind of guy you want to have, if you want like a really, really good boss or a good father, I think Dr. Kubota is that man. And I think he's one of the best mentors since Commander Odagiri from Jetman, but though I admit that Kaku from Dairanger, he was really good too, but Dr. Kubota really had a distinct kind of paternal sense, and he was really willing to, put all that bullshit bureaucracy aside that comes along with, the situation that he's in. But I think the biggest weaknesses of the series are the villains. I thought they lacked personality and were very underdeveloped until the climax. The only memorable thing about the villains were the Neji Rangers, but I'll get more into that into the conclusion of my review. But for now, I give the story and characters a 7.75 out of 10. The action, I admit, is pretty cool but standard, but in the first fifth of the series, you get a really good gimmick of what goes on inside their helmets, and I like how they program their moves in their helmets and act them out. After a while, this feature is totally phased out, but I personally like the idea of looking inside their helmets so you get a better idea of how their costumes function. And it's just not just for show. Of course, literally it is, but you know what I'm saying. Each character represents something in digital technology, and it gives them a unique ability. For example, Miku represents the cell phone and can find sounds. And then Chisato, of course, as a reference to Mika from Bioman, the first ever female Yellow Ranger, has her gimmick as a camera and has infrared vision. And these abilities are used sparingly well. And the fights are pretty good, they're very high-paced, very technical, but you have Kenta's style is more comedic, in which he likes to use pro wrestling-esque elbow drops, and, he kind of goofs around in his fights, whether in and out of costume. Outside of costume, the characters do have substandard combat abilities, and they come across, in the way they fight, it comes across as more counter-esque and more defensive. But Yusaku's skills, compared to everyone else, seems to come across as a black belt level, while the teenagers, based on an American belt system, I would rank them more along as like a purple belt. And then Yusaku's fights, as I said before, tend to be more fast-paced and explosive, and I think they were pretty exciting. And I really like the final poses he does when he destroys the monsters, and then, he goes back to his human form. And the mech fights are pretty decent as well. They kind of have a video game gimmick with the whole game over thing. The designs are very simplistic and old school, and not as complex as, let's say, the Daijujin from Zyuranger or the Daireno from Dairanger, which you may know as the Megazord from the first season, and then the Thunder Megazord from the second season. Or is it the Mega Thunderzord? I forgot which. But anyway. Of course, they are appropriately space-age looking, of course using Power Ranger space, and, seems to have proper function for combat. So I leave the action at an 8 out of 10. The music is pretty decent. The opening theme, the hook has a synthesizing sound to it that perfectly represents, the whole digital theme of the series, and the lyrics talk about surfing the net and all that other stuff. The song is catchy and energetic. At times, the background music for battles will use Requiem by Mozart, which I think is Requiem, I don't know, but I'm not the biggest authority in classical music, but I'm just going what I can think of at the top of my head. It is a little over the top for a Sentai series, but I guess whatever works to build the tension and the intensity. But the background music is, of course, more emphasized on, being synthesized, and, you can't really go wrong with that. The music is good, but, there are other Sentai series with superior music. But I think the music is good enough for an 8.25 out of 10. Alright, now time to get into what I really feel that I really want to say. A lot of Sentai fans who are also familiar with Power Rangers in Space seem to overwhelmingly tell me that they prefer Power Rangers in Space as opposed to Mega Ranger. Even though it's been a long time since I've seen Power Rangers in Space, it still left quite an impression on me, and the way that I remember the series, I can understand why. I felt that in Power Rangers in Space it had much better villains. Ugande, who you may remember as Ecliptor, really has no had no presence or charisma despite his great voice actor. He's just a grunt who's just simply there because he's a grunt. While, of course, as Ecliptor, his Power Rangers in Space counterpart, he has a much more expanded role. He has a personal connection with Astronema. He's that paternal figure to her. And, he's really, really well fleshed out. And I really liked how they did his voice as well, with the, not really, I forgot, no, never mind, I'm not really that much of a tech expert, but I really liked how they give that robotic voice to him. And the Psycho Rangers I really liked a lot, and they felt more intimidating and threatening compared to the Neji Rangers. The Neji Rangers kind of felt a little too stereotypical and a little monotone. But the Psycho Rangers, they just really had this mad charisma, and like they had this you don't want to fuck with them kind of, attitude. And I felt the character development in Space was a whole lot more, and I felt the characters were much more interesting. I guess, it's because, maybe because I'm not Japanese or something, but, in Space really just had this kind of new level that was brought to Power Rangers, and though Mega Rangers has its own unique qualities, I just felt in Space, really, set the tone for what made a really good Power Rangers series after, the first 3 seasons, the terrible Turbo series, and then they figure out what's wrong and they knew what's right. But of course, Super Sentai's been around for a while and it follows a different kind of formula. But, I still recommend, Mega Ranger to a certain degree, but I don't personally recommend it as a gateway series to the Super Sentai genre. But I, recommend, you watch maybe Bioman first, which is, of course, Mega Ranger. A lot of its qualities are taken from Bioman. And, I recommend you get a feel of what Super Sentai is like before watching Mega Ranger. So, I'll stop the review here and give it an overall score of a 7.9 out of 10.